Well, we're here. The last video in the legacy part of this series within a series. The last year, pretty crazy. I've been doing this series for pretty much the entirety of 2024, and now I'm at the finish line. My throat is feeling the effects of this being my third video I'm filming of the day, but you know what? I'm gonna power through. One more to go. Let's make it fun. Welcome back to I Want to Talk About, the series where I take a topic, I sit on camera, and I blabber about it. And like I said, the series within a series, the last legacy year I have to talk about. As you guys can tell from the title today, I want to talk about my favorite games of 2022. So if you don't know how the series goes, if this video that is the last for me out of the legacy years is the first one you're watching, basically I talk about the year in gaming. I get into what the gaming world looked like, specifically like the console market and things like that. I talk about some big games that I didn't get to play, some snubs if you will, some just missed the cut games, like games that I would give like a 7 out of 10 to on a personal scale, the cream before the crop, which were games that would be like 8 or 9 out of 10 on my scale, and then my proper best list of 10 out of 10 games. And we got plenty of games to talk about, so let's try to blow through the intro. 2022, a year in gaming where COVID was still kind of in effect to an extent, and there were still some stock shortages here and there. Things like that were still being worked out, but again, there was still a good number of games and a good quality of games as well. In terms of what the console manufacturers are doing, the PlayStation 5 had some banger exclusive in 2022, the Xbox Series X had cake? I mean, yeah, there was like one or two, but otherwise it's nothing really that crazy, necessarily. The acquisition wars were still in effect. Sony bought Bungie for $3.6 billion, which has clearly worked wonders for its live service output. And Xbox had announced its intent at the time to acquire Activision Blizzard for $69 billion. Nice. Obviously, that was the big story of 2022 for Xbox. It was them attempting to acquire Activision, and Sony and the FTC and everyone on the planet basically doing everything in their power to try to stop it. It was a conversation that very heavily preceded them. Even if they had a big year for exclusives, much of the conversation was going to be on that, the giant court case around this. Meanwhile, while that was making the rounds and all the controversy was happening, Nintendo went out fishing. Because that's what they do. Everyone else is fighting and Nintendo is somewhere fishing. They were still continuing to drop banger exclusives as they were doing all throughout the Switch era in 2022. And even with continued rumors about the next platform, the Switch 2, it was crazy to see just how much they were able to drop in 2022, even without having The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom ready just yet. And I've said it before, but that was the crazy thing about the Switch era. With, say, the Wii U, there would be huge gaps between the heavy hitters, but with the Switch, there were like 10 or so first-party games between heavy hitters, and some of those smaller games could even be considered heavy hitters, so it felt like there was always something to play. And 2022 was, I would honestly say, one of my favorite years being a Switch owner. There were a lot of banger exclusives in 2022. As far as third-party news, there wasn't a whole lot. One of the biggest things was EA withdrawing from the FIFA license, which was kind of a big topic of conversation because obviously FIFA is a huge game the world over. And obviously they still make their own soccer or football game, but it's not FIFA. Again, pretty huge deal at the time. And 2022 was also the year of the release of the Steam Deck, which was basically Steam making almost their own version of the Nintendo Switch. And this thing has actually managed to be pretty damn successful. A lot of times handhelds going up against Nintendo don't get to live to tell the tale, but since the Steam Deck is just kind of like one part of what Steam does, it's actually been able to survive very nicely. So that's the third-party news. Now on to the actual games themselves. In terms of the snubs, the big games that I didn't play, it's quite funny because 2022 is one of the rare examples of a year where the two big Game of the Year contenders that were really duking it out were both games that I didn't play. Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok. I didn't play Elden Ring because, again, I don't really play From Software games, so what was gonna make this one any more appealing to me? And God of War Ragnarok, well, I mentioned my hot take in 2018 that I didn't really enjoy God of War 2018, so given that this was just going to be more of the same, what reason would I have to play it? So, I missed out on the year's two big games. Oh, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3. That was a very popular one, but I didn't play that. But then again, I mentioned in several other videos that I didn't play Xenoblade, so I guess you shouldn't be too surprised. So what did I play in 2022? Well, there was a lot, and that is evident by the just missed the cut section, which, just like I did in the 2020 video, I'm gonna blow through this without giving descriptions because there are 13 whole games here. Yeah, I played a lot of games in 2022. So I'm just gonna get them out of the way as fast as I can with no real explanations, and I'll let your mind work with them and what my opinions could possibly be of them. Ready? Don't blink. Stranger Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin, Ghostwire Tokyo, LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, MLB The Show 22, Klonoa Fantasy Reverie Series, Stray, Cult of the Lamb, Saints Row, yes, I did actually like the Saints Row reboot, back off, The Last of Us Part 1, Metal Hellsinger, Evil West, Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII Reunion, and High on Life. Did you blink? Well, if you did, too bad. I'm not doing that again. Also, lately, if there are quite a few remasters in a given year that are going to be in the cream before the crop section, I like to blow through them before that. And yes, we do have 2 remasters to mention here just to get out of the way. We have the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection, which wasn't entirely necessary, but was still a good way to experience these 2 games. And Sonic Origins, which I know a lot of people had their issues with, but on a personal level, it was the way that I was able to beat all of these games except for Sonic 1, and I personally enjoyed it quite a bit. There is one re-release collection of sorts that I will save for later, partially because it's a bit crazier to me than these 2 other collections. So with that in mind, let's get on to the cream before the crop. Bless Xbox Game Pass, because that thing has helped me to discover some games I honestly would have never even spared a passing glance at otherwise. We'll see that a lot in this video. And Windjammers 2 is a perfect example of that. This game is by far the most fun I've ever had with a Frisbee in my life. Now, when this game came to Game Pass, I had no idea what the first one even was. It didn't even dawn on me how big of a deal this game was, because it was the follow-up to a game that had released 28 years prior on the Neo Geo that basically was the most intense Frisbee game that you ever did see. And it turned out this game was awesome. So awesome, in fact, that it was one of those games that I actually bought on Xbox before it left Game Pass. It was just such a thrilling, fast-paced arcade throwback that managed to feel nostalgic while also modernizing its formula to keep itself very fresh. It's bursting with 90s flair in its aesthetic, and it stands out as one of the most unique sports games that I've ever played. I can see why Windjammers has a passionate community behind it, because this game is an absolute blast. Probably one of the more slept on games of 2022, and if you haven't played it, you absolutely should. Hey, look, I'm actually going to be talking about Pokemon. Mainline Pokemon. Would you believe me if I told you this was the first mainline Pokemon game that I'd actually beaten? Yeah, again, turn-based games aren't usually my thing, but it helps that recent Pokemon games have actually gone through the act of making things a lot easier for a doofus like me. Plus, Legends Arceus actually looked like a unique change of pace for a series that, to me, felt like it was kind of going through the motions a little bit. Fun little anecdote, when I worked in retail in 2017, right when the Switch had come out, I had a coworker who, knowing that I was a big Nintendo fan, basically pitched to me this idea of a Pokemon game in the style of Zelda Breath of the Wild. It sounded genius to me, and as soon as I first saw the trailer for this game, it was exactly as I had pictured it in my mind when this coworker pitched that idea to me. It was such a breath of fresh air for the series with some major switch-ups to the gameplay that suddenly made me excited for Pokemon all over again. And it was nice that they were able to tone down some of the tedium of previous games while making a game with a greater sense of freedom this time around. Sure, it had a performance hitch or two, are we surprised? It's Game Freak. But the game itself was plenty of fun, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. And would you believe there was more Pokemon to come this year? And by that I mean mainline Pokemon. More on that in a bit. Yeah, that other re-release collection I was saving for later, this one right here. One more time, I'd like everyone to say thank you Xbox Game Pass, because I wouldn't have known about this if it wasn't on Game Pass. Well, it's not anymore, and I didn't buy it before it left, so meh. But yes, as we'll learn a little later in the video, 2022 was the year of Pac-Man. And this game kind of snuck up on me until it was released on Xbox Game Pass. But I ended up sinking some pretty good time into it right after it came out, when I was starting to get on a big puzzle game kick, and especially a pretty big Pac-Man kick. I've had a huge soft spot for Pac-Man, so it was fun getting to experience some unique, different takes on the classic formula of Pac-Man. Along with whatever the fuck Pac-in-Time was. Seriously, Pac-in-Time was gross. But the other games here were pretty great. I personally sunk a lot of time into Pac-Man Championship Edition, which took on a unique take for the Pac-Man series with its time-based challenge format. And having learned about it through Smash Brothers, it was cool to finally get to play Pac-Land, which is honestly still a pretty fun platformer take on Pac-Man that still plays pretty well today. Obviously, if you have readily accessible access to the classic games on here, this package might not be all that necessary, but as far as an all-in-one Pac-Man collection goes, this is well worth grabbing, especially given that it's only $20. And I'm pretty sure it's regularly on sale, so you'll probably find it for an even better price at certain times. Yet another time where I'd like to hear a thank you Xbox Game Pass. I haven't talked about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles once in this series because, well, I don't really follow the franchise or the IP, but this game looked far too fun to pass up on. I always say, I'll play a licensed game even if it's in a series that I don't know if it looks good, and Shredder's Revenge looked too good. And after playing it in co-op with my brother, it was really good. It's essentially a full-blown throwback game, being a throwback to the old-school beat-em-up games that inspired it, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, and also to the old-school TMNT cartoon. Everything about the game screams 80s to 90s, but in the most lovingly crafted and charming way, as the beat-em-up combat is solid and the pixel art graphics just pop in the most beautiful way. It's loaded with personality, and it feels like a fantastic love letter to the classic defining era of the heroes in a half shell. And again, even as someone who doesn't truly follow the series that much, it's great to see the amount of love that was poured into this game and how faithful it is to the classic Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles media. As Donatello once said, Bossa Nova! Chevy Nova? Excellent! I would spend this part also saying thank you Xbox Game Pass, but again I'm going to spend it saying, guys, I've dumped around 200 hours into this game, send help. I know. When Power Wash Simulator was announced to be coming to Xbox Game Pass, I thought it was a joke. I mean, it came out on Game Pass at the same time as My Friend Peppa Pig. How could I not make a joke about that combo? A joke that one of the Xbox Twitter pages actually acknowledged. Like, Xbox, slow down with all the peak, why don't you? But I decided to download it just to see if it was a legit thing or just a joke, and then I couldn't stop playing it. And then 58 hours later, I beat the main campaign, which is probably the most time I've put into a game that can actually be beaten. And then I started beating all the extra content. And then I bought the DLCs. And then I went for all the achievements. And then the game came to PS Plus and I played through the main story again and got the platinum. I think I might have a problem. Honestly, I can't help it. Power Wash Simulator is one of the most vibey, relaxing games that I have ever played. And yes, it has its flaws. I mean, it does feel like some parts of the game come down to pixel hunting and all. But there are few better games to play when you just want to enter a zen-like meditative state. It's perfect for my ADHD because it just gives me something that I want to focus on. Throw on a longer YouTube video or an album, or if it's your thing, a podcast, and just vibe. You end up getting lost in the sauce and spending a few hours just cleaning somebody's house that you don't even know. Or you could spend your time reading into the Power Wash Simulator lore, which yes, that sounds weird, but there's actual lore. There's an actual story in this game. I promise I'm not going nuts. Maybe just a little bit. It sounds ridiculous, but this game is so damn addicting, and if you haven't played it yet, well, I'd recommend it, but I feel like I might be leading you down a bad path if I do. So in that case, allow me to be a bad influence. Go play it. I'm gonna be honest, while Splatoon 3 is definitely a great game, this was the Splatoon game I honestly felt the slightest bit more lukewarm toward. Don't get it twisted, I was looking forward to it when I first saw the gameplay, and I do have a lot of fun with the series and this game, but I think those early trailers gave me the wrong impression. While I was hoping for and expecting Splatoon 3 to be a change of pace from its predecessors, especially in the campaign, it turned out to feel like a little bit more of the same. I didn't really feel a ton of newness or freshness from the last game, and given that Splatoon 2 already wasn't a huge change up from the first one, it was kind of noticeable here. I think what helped it get by was two things. One, that it was still an incredibly polished game and Nintendo continued to excel with what it was trying to build. But two, the fact that it's the only game of its kind on the market. Oftentimes, what can make a series that doesn't change a lot feel even more frustrating is if a glut of copycat games starts surrounding it and dilute the market. Looking at you, Guitar Hero. But in the case of Splatoon, it's pretty much the only game of its kind on the market that matters, so it doesn't really feel worn out or overdone. Thus, even with it not being a huge change-up, Splatoon 3 still remains plenty of fun and is especially recommended for newcomers looking to get into the series for the first time. Though again, I do hope that the inevitable Splatoon 4 pushes things forward in a greater way gameplay-wise. Okay. I promise you guys won't have to keep saying thank you Xbox Game Pass for every game on here, but this one, yeah, you probably should. Proteus was a game I had no clue about up until it showed up on Game Pass, and even now, I could barely tell if I'm pronouncing the game correctly. Proteus, Proteus, I think it's Proteus, but correct me if I'm wrong. But when I looked into what it was, it turns out it was right up my alley. It's basically a modernized take on the boomer shooter, which is a term used for FPS games akin to the classic Doom games. But this basically is like if classic Doom was dropped into the gameplay styles of Doom Eternal, so it has the new gameplay but the old look. Thus, it's a fun throwback but also a great modernized game in and of itself. It thankfully doesn't play on cheap nostalgia either. It creates an experience that's great whether you're a veteran shooter player or a new school fan, because either way you're getting plenty of demon slaying madness and rip-roaring fun. There's also a level editor here that is absolutely awesome. Naturally, people have used it to recreate classic Doom and Quake levels, of course, that's a given, but some people have even used it to recreate things like Princess Peach's castle from Super Mario 64, which is fucking awesome. Unfortunately, it has since left Game Pass. I do still have it because I bought it before it left, but it's not an expensive game, so if you haven't played it, I highly recommend trying it out and giving the developers your support. They really did something special here. Compared to Legends Arceus, this, on the other hand, was much more controversial, and honestly, I do see why. My thoughts on Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are honestly very complicated, so hear me out. In a perfect world, I don't know why I'm punching my hand, but in a perfect world, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet would have easily topped Legends Arceus, gotten a 10 out of 10 from me, and could have easily been my Game of the Year for 2022. That's how much I enjoyed it. It's a genuine evolution of the Pokemon formula, and I love the open world elements, the multiple storylines thing, and especially the addition of auto battling that made things so much easier for someone like me that's not usually into turn-based RPGs. Combine that with some nice writing and great characters, I personally absolutely love Nemona, and this game really felt like it could have been special. But then there's the obvious Don fan in the room. This game at launch was a level of unpolished I've rarely seen in a game before. And I'm not entirely sure if patches have made it any more bearable now, because it's not just the unpolished visuals here. The frame rate affects how a game plays. And in a lot of ways, this game's frame rate is so bad that it feels like the game barely runs, it just walks. And that's a shame, because this really could have been the best new game in the Pokemon series. And I absolutely applaud it for its ambition. But I can't go without mentioning how unpolished it is. And again, it pains me, because it could have been my Game of the Year for 2022. But for it to do that, it would have to run competently, and unfortunately, it doesn't do that. Again, I don't know if it's been patched much, but if it has, definitely play the game. It's a lot of fun, it's just a shame that it's wrapped in a pretty messy package. Okay, so no, Clone Hero was not new in 2022, it had been out for a while up to that point, but given that it had its full release in 2022, I saved it for now. To that end, given my love of Guitar Hero, I guess this one is fairly fitting to close out the cream before the crop in the legacy years of the series. Clone Hero is basically a fan-made version of Guitar Hero that's fairly identical in its gameplay, but the main draw comes from the fact that it has a pretty small default track list because it kind of encourages you to add in your own songs. Now, custom songs were not new to Clone Hero, as fans have been playing custom songs on the PC version of Guitar Hero 3 for years. Some even found ways to add customs to the console versions of the games. But the thing is that the PC version of Guitar Hero 3 was kinda shitty. It basically required a supercomputer to play, and even if you had one, it was prone to slowdown at points that made it a bitch and a half to actually play. And sure, games like Frets on Fire and Phase Shift tried their best to fill the gaps, but GH3 PC still ruled that space. Eventually, Clone Hero came along and basically was a wholesale improvement of that, and yeah, just all around, it's a really, really good game. Super easy to set up and get custom songs on. It performs incredibly well, and it's basically a best of all worlds for Guitar Hero in terms of combining a lot of the franchise's best elements. It's nice that they were able to add some nice accessibility options in the final update as well, especially as someone who can only play the game on my keyboard right now. I only have a Mac, and while the game is obviously Mac compatible, my Explorer guitar is not compatible with Mac in any capacity, so I'm stuck with the keyboard. Though honestly, I think I'm kind of okay with that, because given that today's meta for custom songs just seems to be who can make the hardest songs known to humanity, honestly, I don't think I need Carpal Tunnel in my life. Nope, I think I'm good. Either way, Clone Hero is great fun and still well worth playing. I know it's been rumored for a little and people have talked about it, but honestly, I don't even think I need a Guitar Hero reboot in the future when I have something like this. Alright, so the cream before the crop went on for a minute, now we're on to the proper best list, and we have 8 games here. Again, 2022 had some bangers. Starting out at the number 8 spot, one of the few, I think the only remake on this side of the list, and I mentioned 2022 being the year of Pac-Man, and let's continue that. Pac-Man World Re-Pac. You know, it's funny because the original version of Pac-Man World was a game I grew up on, but when I tried to replay it as an adult, I couldn't get through it because it just felt so bleh to me. But I was very excited when this remake, remaster, what... Semantics, I don't know what qualifies as a remake or remaster anymore, but when this was announced I was excited, and while playing it, I fell in love with it all over again. It's one of those games where I feel like I just can't find anything really to complain about with it. It feels like so much love really went into making this feel modern, and they cleaned it up a lot in terms of the controls and gameplay to make it feel so damn good to play. And playing it in this form actually helped me realize how clever a lot of the level design is. That's something I struggled to do in revisiting the original version of the game, but here it was so much easier. And naturally, of course, this game is colorful and adorable, and the visuals are awesome, perfectly fitting for what a Pac-Man World game should look like. It's kind of sad that this hasn't led into a Pac-Man World 2 remake yet, or hell, even a wholly new Pac-Man World game, but all in all, it's a fantastic remake, by far one of my favorites that I've played, and a game that I can highly recommend, regardless of whether you're a Pac-Man fan or not. At number 7, moving to the slightly smaller scale here, but a nevertheless awesome game, I definitely got to go with Neon White. This one actually just got on my list pretty recently because of the fact that it ended up on Xbox Game Pass recently. So yes, you can hit this with the thank you Xbox Game Pass, even though it was 2 years late. But Neon White was a little funky to me. I was hearing so much about it when it came out in 2022, but I never got around to playing it back then, and a part of the reason why was because for a long time there were rumors about it coming to Game Pass, and then it was announced for Game Pass but not released on the service until a whole year later. Never seen that before with an already released game. Announce it like, yeah, it's coming to Game Pass, and then a year later it comes to Game Pass. That's kind of why I waited. I kind of just wanted to wait until it was on Game Pass, and I didn't expect it to take so long. But it was worth the wait because this game is awesome. The way it mixes first-person shooting with puzzle platforming is genuinely incredible and absolutely sublime, and I love the way the game feels like it so heavily emphasizes speedrunning as well. Between that and its beautiful anime-inspired aesthetic, it makes her one of the most kinetic and adrenaline-inducing games that I've played. I know there's some talk about the story, and yeah, I understand people's critiques of it, though I do quite like the visual novel style it's presented in. But honestly, as a gameplay above all type of gamer, I enjoy this game way too much to lower my score on it. It's just gaming in its purest form, and it's an absolute joyride from start to finish. At number 6, staying on the indie front, a game that I have replayed quite a few times up to this point, I gotta go with Sifu. Another one of those games that kind of snuck up on me, Sifu is nevertheless one of the most compelling and stylish games in recent memory to me. I initially struggled with it because of how challenging it was, but ever since they added difficulty options, it's become one of those games that I just replay on a semi-regular basis. I actually just finished a third playthrough of it because it just came out on Game Pass. So if you want to thank Game Pass again, go ahead. But yeah, it is an awesome game, and don't be fooled, even with the more accessible difficulty options, there's still plenty of challenge to this game. But it's worth it because the martial arts combat, which is based on Pac-Man Kung Fu, is some of the most gripping stuff that I've ever experienced in a video game, point blank period. It's a big part of why I keep going back to it because it's just so unbelievably satisfying. And I also love the concept of every time you die, you come back older and you get stronger, but you have less health, and if you get too old, you die. It adds an interesting layer to the overall gameplay. The visuals are also awesome using a stylized lighting style akin to cel shading, and the story actually has some really poignant emotional twists and powerful moments as well. It's really a fantastic game, and if you haven't played it yet, I highly recommend doing so. At number 5, moving back to the first-party Sony front, I definitely gotta go with Horizon Forbidden West. With how much I loved Zero Dawn when I first played it, I definitely screamed a few times when Horizon Forbidden West was announced at the PlayStation 5 reveal event in 2020. And then when I finally got it, I beat it in a weekend. I beat my games fast, shut up. But it also helps that I just love this game so much and didn't want to put it down at all. Even though I had loved Zero Dawn, I thought that its combat took a bit to get used to and was a little tough here and there. But in this game, the melee combat is so much smoother and so much more satisfying that it's just an absolute joy to play. The addition of underwater exploration is also great, the new traversal elements are super fun, and the open world itself, I mean, I adored it. I am very picky when it comes to open worlds, but Forbidden West's open world was just so fun to explore. Even if a lot of its population was just kind of stuff laying on the ground, I was still okay with that. I constantly felt like I was finding new things or doing something in the world. And the open world was so good that I was traversing quite a bit of it on foot and still having an amazing time. Funny little anecdote as well about this game. At the beginning, they show you a recap of Zero Dawn with visuals from that game, and the visuals were so good that I didn't realize I was looking at Zero Dawn's visuals and not Forbidden West's, so you can only imagine how stunned it looked when the actual Forbidden West visuals loaded up on screen. This is a game that I just absolutely love, and as much as there's like this wave now of people saying, I don't see the hype around Horizon, or saying that it's like an industry plant series, I think these games are honestly some of my favorites from Sony. With that said, I can't wait for them to release a remaster of this in 3 years' time. At number 4 on the first-party Nintendo front, I definitely gotta go with Bayonetta 3. You don't know how satisfying it was to finally get this game. For those that don't know, Bayonetta 3 was first announced at the Game Awards in 2017 in one of the coolest ways that I've ever seen. Initially, they just kind of announced that Bayonetta 1 and 2 were coming to the Switch, which was good news to me because I hadn't played the games yet. And at that point, at that announcement, I distinctly remember texting my brother saying, this means that Bayonetta 3 might actually happen. And almost as soon as I hit send on that message, Reggie Fils-Aimé tells Jeff Keighley, did you really think I was just coming here to announce Bayonetta 1 and 2 remasters and that's it? And boom! Bayonetta 3. I couldn't believe it. And then, as you could obviously tell by this video, it took 5 years for it to come out. Now look, I know that there were people who were waiting for this sequel longer than I had, but given that I had finally played Bayonetta 1 and 2 through those Switch re-releases right after Bayonetta 3 was announced, I was right there in that painful boat of waiting. Every time the word Bayonetta went trending on Twitter, and it wasn't news related to Bayonetta 3, I felt physical pain. But then it finally got re-announced at a Nintendo Direct in late 2021, came out a year later, and I was the happiest man alive. This game was every bit as frantic, fast-paced, and thrilling as I'd hoped for. The combat was incredibly layered with some cool new concepts to it as well, and it basically was everything I've always loved about the Bayonetta series, with more than enough new content to keep it fresh and fantastic, even years after Bayonetta 2. Is it better than Bayonetta 2? Probably not. Bayonetta 2 is one of my top 6 favorite games of all time. But on its own, Bayonetta 3 is an incredibly special game, and one that I'm glad to say turned out fantastic given the incredibly long wait. At number 3, we're staying on the first-party Nintendo front for one more minute. I gotta go with Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Years after their first attempt on the GameCube, Nintendo was finally able to get a proper 3D Kirby game to work, and not only did it work, but it went on to become my favorite game in the series. Kirby and the Forgotten Land obviously immediately caught my eye when it was announced because I love the Kirby franchise, and I wasn't expecting them to come in and say, yeah, we finally got a fully 3D one. But they did, and it was pretty much everything I was hoping for a 3D Kirby game to be. I even ended up completing the game 100%, which is something I don't do with a lot of games, so take that for what it's worth. Even though compared to other 3D platformers on the Switch, it does take a more linear approach than, say, Super Mario Odyssey, duh. The overall gameplay style of Kirby translates very nicely into a 3D plane. Given that Kirby's often been about exploration and finding hidden paths and whatnot, moving that to 3D works out pretty much perfectly, and the exploration element is still plenty of fun. And as memed as some parts of it can be, Mouthful Mode is plenty of fun. The new abilities that Kirby can get through it are absolutely incredible. It always kind of blows my mind how much more creative they can continue being with Kirby's power-ups. And the Waddle Dee Town, along with its collection of minigames, is honestly so adorable. It helps this game feel like a beautiful love letter to the Kirby series. It's everything I've always loved about Kirby wrapped up in a fresh new package, and like I said, it makes her my favorite game in the series. I'm definitely excited to see how HAL Laboratories builds on this in future Kirby games. At number 2, I can already see some people saying I might be overrating this game, but I still absolutely adore it, so I'm gonna put it here regardless. Definitely gotta go with Sonic Frontiers. I know, some people might be really surprised to see this game in this list at all, let alone this high, but honestly, Sonic Frontiers is actually my favorite Sonic game. Well, I don't know, Shadow Generations might be in contention at this point, but still! Sonic Frontiers was such a unique Sonic game when it was first shown off as an open-world take on the Sonic formula. It seemed so out there, and I remember there being a lot of skepticism, and look, when it comes to Sonic, yeah, you're kind of trained to be skeptical. This franchise has had the best and worst of every scenario. But honestly, when it came time to play this game, it just grabbed me from the start and never really let go. I never got bored with the open world, which is tough to say for someone like me who's very picky with my open world games. Though I think it helps that this one allows me to play as a really fast character, so any kind of problems I'd have with traversal are kind of thrown out the window. There's such a great sense of freedom to it all. The combat is really fun, the linear cyberspace levels are infinitely replayable, and there's some very good minigames this time around. Big's Fishing is actually really good this time, and some super epic boss fights as well. And across the board, it feels like this game is just such a love letter to the franchise as a whole. I mentioned Big's Fishing as one example, but there are so many things thrown in here as callbacks to previous Sonic titles, but done in a way that doesn't just feel like a hand wave. It feels like both a stunning ode to the past and an excellent evolution that lays a good groundwork for the future of the series that I think we started to see a bit with Shadow Generations. I know it's a bit polarizing because of course it is, it's Sonic, but Frontiers is my favorite Sonic game, and it's definitely one that I gotta go back and replay. Frontiers was my game of the year at the end of 2022, but then this game came along. My actual game of the year from 2022, and this one has officially come back to bite me in the ass. If you know, you know. I gotta go with Vampire Survivors. Yeah, so remember when I talked about this in my video on last June's Nintendo Direct and I said this? Either way, I played Vampire Survivors a bit thanks to Game Pass, and it's such an interesting game. I luckily was able to get out of it intact, but I know it's a game that's super addicting to a lot of people. I managed to escape before I could get addicted, but yeah, it's pretty addicting. Yeah, about that. So when this game first showed up on Game Pass, yes, thank Game Pass one more time. I didn't play it for super long, maybe on account of it not seeming like my style of game and because I was still trying to finish my gaming backlog. But once I did and was looking for something to play, I chose to give it another chance. And ever since, I've turned into a monster. It's basically a roguelike shoot-'em-up where you're an automatically attacking character, so you just kind of basically have to move around. It sounds simple, but the game throws so much at you that it becomes challenging until you level up enough and get strong enough that you just feel like an absolute god. And honestly, this game should just rename itself Dopamine Simulator, because if those gameplay hours that I showed didn't clue you in, this is perhaps the most addicting game that I've ever played. It's easy to get into but challenging to master, and it's such an insane power fantasy that just nails that roguelike feeling of just one more run. And as the game moves on, it gets wilder and wilder, and it's just so trippy, but so amazing at the same time. And with all the DLCs they've added to it, with collabs from Contra, Castlevania, and even Among Us, it's really become quite a gem of a game. It's on Game Pass if you haven't tried it, but even beyond that, the game's like $5, it's regularly on sale, and its DLCs all go for like $2 to $3. Like, you can buy everything this game has to offer for like less than $25. So yeah, go buy it. Wait, fuck, should I be concerned that I'm basically encouraging people to get into a game that's going to cause an addiction? Ah, well, it's Vampire Survivors. It's not dangerous. Go play it. Whew! I did it! The last Legacy video in the I Want to Talk About My Favorite Games series. Holy crap, I've done it. I am so tired. 2022 was a banger year, so there were a lot of games to talk about. I've been filming this particular video for almost 55 minutes. My camera's on 1 bar of battery. And overall, I think I've filmed for like 3 hours today. I am so tired, but I'm so proud of myself. I've been working on this series all year long, and I've finally gotten to the finish line. This sub-series rather, has been a huge labor of love. I'm so glad to have gotten to do it. And I'm thankful for all of you guys who have supported it in any way, shape, or form. But before I get sappy, of course, this was all just my opinion on 2022 as a year in gaming. What were your favorite games of 2022? What were the games you played the most, the games you had the most memories with? What were some games that I didn't mention that you played a lot of? And of course, for the question of the video. You know it's the last one in the Legacy videos, so of course I gotta ask the big question. What is your overall favorite year in gaming? Looking back, what was the year that you enjoyed the most, the game that you had the most favorite games from, let's say, the year you have the most memories with, whatever it may be, whatever reason you have, what's your favorite year in gaming? Whatever your thoughts, opinions, and experiences are, leave them down in the comments below. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe and support some of my other ventures that I have linked in the description, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. Like I said, this is the last video in the series within a series, but it's not the last favorite games of a given year that I'm going to be doing. From this point forward, for however long I'm doing YouTube for, hopefully a very long time, these videos will just be year-end things. There are no more years in the past for me to go back to, so I'm obviously just going to keep staying in the present or the future. In fact, the next video I'm going to be doing that is a long-form video is probably going to end up being my favorite games of 2024. Either that or albums that I didn't review in 2024. One or the other. So, it's not goodbye, it's just see you in the next video, I guess. Either way, like I said, this is the last one in the Legacy years, and this series has been a huge labor of love and also a big weight on my shoulders, but I'm proud of myself for getting through it. Like I said, I've been working on it all year, pretty much. Planning it out since like the end of last year. So to actually be able to get to the finish line with it, to finally get to the last video here, it feels good. I am very tired and my throat hurts, but I'm definitely proud of myself. And I'm thankful that you guys have taken to the series. Those of you that have supported the videos, I really, really appreciate it. And even though this set of videos is over, I've still got plenty that I'm going to be doing in the future. I've got some ideas planned, don't worry. Obviously, next year probably won't have nearly as many videos, but I'll try to do the best with the ones that I do. So stay tuned for those, of course, but until next time, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for supporting the series within a series, these Legacy year videos in the My Favorite Games of a Given Year series. I greatly appreciate it. And of course, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.